Today is an unusual episode because we have a very, very special guest. Her name is Diane Ram, and she's starting a nonprofit organization that has a very, very creative way of addressing conservation, trying to attack it at the source. So rather than try to explain it myself, let's bring Diane on so that she can tell us all about her nonprofit. Hi, Diane.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. You're doing something that I think is really, really fascinating. And when I met you at first, what I could tell right away was that you have an incredible origin story. Before you get into that, though, why don't you tell us a little bit about your nonprofit?
We became a nonprofit, Mavericks Wave Tribes United, December 15th of 2020. And, you think...
Super fresh.
Yes, it's super fresh, but it's been in the works and in creation for 3.5 years. I don't think we realize how long people, work on something before it comes out on the market. So
what's your take on conservation?
People spend their whole lives studying conservation, but for me, it's simple things and having sustainable living and being able to give back to our children's children, give them something that we had where it was clean living, clean water, clean beaches. So there's too much plastics and rubbish in our life where it's everywhere, and you have to look at it and say, wow, it's kind of like the big elephant in the room. If you were to say if I have any formalized training in conservation, I don't. This is really grassroots for me.
Is that even the right word that I should be using when I talk about your organization? I almost feel like there's maybe even a better word.
You know what? If there was one word I would say, it's just following your. We're here to do. I'm not going to get spiritual on you, but I feel like
you're allowed to.
We have our own work. Like we have a job and everything, but also there's something deeper that I feel like each of us has a special calling to do. It doesn't come up and say, this is going to be what your real mark on the world is. And if you want to leave a mark, then that seed is within each and every one of us. Take, for example, your company. You help us identify who we are and help us brand ourselves. We know nothing about it. So there's people that in special pockets making big changes, right?
Thank you. Thanks for appreciating us. One of the things that I would imagine is incredibly challenging is that people are more and more short-sighted, I feel like, and people want things right away, and there's less and less interest in wanting to think about the long term. So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that mindset? Because I'd imagine that a lot of your work is trying to address that very issue, that very problem.
In my small team of people, mindset is a word that comes up several times in the discussion. And that was the big, we were collaborating with people, and we've landed with an amazing young man in Fiji who's, while I'm thinking of this company, he's thinking about waste cleanup on the island. He did a proposal and he's been looking for funding, and finally we just like ships connecting in the night, right? And his whole thing is mindset, and I'm thinking, I'm like a bull in a china shop. Get to it, get it done. Forget about mindset. He keeps reminding me we've got to get them where they're at. We've got to meet them where they're at. And that's a big word. It's a big word I think everyone's grappling with. But it's slow little changes. And I think it's connecting the dots visually so people can get, you're eating fish all the time. That's your main food. But if you're cutting fish open and there's loaded with plastics in their belly, that's a big connection, right?
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how this all came about? I mean, I know this story already. I've already had the benefit of hearing it, but for our audience, it'd be really cool if you could retell it.
3.5 years ago, going on 4, and I had Fiji's my home, and I had a tremendous loss in my life, and I needed to just decompress. So I went home, and you go.
Were you going back often already?
Yes, every couple of years, I would go home. And I was sitting on the beach, and a beach that I had grown up on where there was nothing on there. When I went back, there were 2 hotels, a huge Intercontinental, a huge one, and then another hotel, which was a local kind of, hangout resort. So
these are Waste City organizations, right? I'm sure.
I don't want to attach anything to their branding. What I saw, and I don't say it's necessarily from that, but what I saw washing up on the beach every day was just things like toothpaste, PET bottles, the lids of bottles, all kinds of plastic rubbish. And so I would take my bag like I do in Half Moon Bay, California, and pick up rubbish, and while I'm walking the dogs, and I thought, you know what, I need to pick up this stuff. So each morning I would go out and there'd be more rubbish, and you pick up and you clean up and there'd be more rubbish. And I'm thinking, where is this coming from? One day I took the bus into town and hung around at the local shops. And as the bus was leaving town, there was a bank on one of the villages, and all this rubbish was thrown over the bank. So when the tides rise, they back up the rivers and the rivers take this out to sea. I was shocked. It's something that you see that's so hideous you can't unsee it. I've not been able to unsee that. And then it started to grow in my mind. Okay, what do you do? I don't think I'm very good at working on it. For me, I need to see changes, and I need to see changes fast. So I decided to start the nonprofit.
Okay.
It took me 3.5 years to get the courage to do it, and a lot of self-reflection, because it's not a lot of self-doubt. So it's not an easy thing to step into a company, because people go through these questions.
Well, especially at the scale of your mission. I mean, that's a huge undertaking.
It's insane. It's literally insane if you're going to label it. So
in those years, what were you doing to figure out? Because I mean, obviously, I think it's about okay. I know I need to start a nonprofit. That sounds like that's what you realize. But then it's like, what does that mean? What does that look like? What is that nonprofit? How did that start? What's it first focus on? So was that what those first couple of years?
The first couple of years, what it really was is you having dreams of, you're dreaming about, you're seeing those images, you're dreaming about rubbish, and every time you see, news about plastic and pollution, it comes up. And then I decided, I really need a life coach. I got a life coach, and the coach was like, you have to do this. And I'm like, I feel so, I said, I feel like this is too much. It's a big sacrifice on your life. So 3 years of talking to a life coach. And once you make that decision and to jump off the cliff, then things start to happen,
Gravity. You're just going.
You come into our lives, you get the right attorney to help you set up, and then it just grows. It rolls. You become like a ball rolling down the hill.
Well, your message is so powerful and important that I mean, I imagine that every person that you talk to, you're going to touch them in some way.
I hope so. You've got organizations like PETA and stuff, and sometimes that stuff is hard to watch. It's the little things, like when you start to become more and more and more aware. You're ordering your box of stuff from QVC, or the cosmetic industry is terrible about this, the extra packaging. And by the time you get this little,
Oh, I know. You create so much trash, rubbish, and bad stuff too, like plastics and styrofoams.
And it's crazy when you start to look at your packaging and saying, wow, this has got to stop. And one thing rolls into another, and then you've got a full-on tackling of the people that deliver your stuff. I mean, it just goes on. So you really have to stay focused.
Where are you starting? If you had to say like a place that you're starting, so it sounds like close to home.
Fiji is kind of like the hub of the Pacific. So Fiji's home. I know the people, the connections. I grew up there. If we can make impactful changes there, then we can hit the other islands of Tonga, Samoa, Vanuatu. These islands are at serious risk from just the global impact of climate change. If you take Fiji, for example, Fiji has been hit in the last 4 years. I think it's with 3, I don't have my full facts, Category 5 hurricanes.
Wow.
Which are devastating. I mean, and it's amazing that they have not had more loss of life than they have. They're an amazing country. They're resilient, but these islands are taking the brunt of what the world has collectively done and how we've impacted, this planet.
What's the biggest threat to your mission? Is it tourism? Because it sounds to me like it'd be tourism.
I don't want to say it's tourism. Tourism brings a lot of money in. I think it's more, I would have to say, I'm not going to label any entity, but I'm going to have to say it's the mindset. That's
okay.
The biggest threat, being apathetic to what's happening, and not just for Fiji, but the tourists, all of them as well. And education, it needs to be a powerful tool, and the message needs to get through. You talk about branding. I'm realizing the importance of branding. And
it's so critical.
Yes. And and I only know this much of it, and I'm realizing it's like, you've got to really get on top of getting the message across. It's being apathetic, and it's the mindset. I go back to each of us as individuals. and waking up to awareness. And that's what it is, just being aware. There's a lot of things behind the scene that we don't know and we don't get, but we have the power. The people have the power because they drive the economy, right?
Oh
People
yeah,
don't realize. Yeah,
they're the ones that make the decisions on what to consume.
that's a biggie.
So I almost think of it more as education. Then is that?
Yes, yes. And like I said, what now that once we got started and once we start, when we complete with Mavericks Wave as an entity, and then we connected with you to brand, and we took a long time to get the logo because the logo has energy with it. We took a long time for that. And once we got to that part, then things start to come up through social media, which is an amazing way of connecting the world. Our whole program for this year is set because through social media, we met someone that is doing exactly on the ground. He has a plan fully implemented of what our whole vision was 3 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
So he has the blueprint for you.
He has the blueprint, and he just didn't have anyone to fund it. And so it was just a brief meeting on the social media. He posted picking up rubbish every 3 months, and I asked him a question, and then it exploded.
Well, it's like you say, right? I mean, it's about attacking the mindset on the ground level. You do that with enough people and connect with enough people.
Yes,
and the beauty of social media is that if you can get on millions of people's feeds, possibly.
Yes. Hopefully, hopefully,
So is that your content strategy? Is that what you're going to be doing? So you're going to be hosting these seminars and then posting about them and providing a lot of informational content?
No.
Oh.
No. He has a structure in place.
Oh wow.
There's a hierarchical system that's connected into the government, but also within the tribes of Fiji. And they've had this structure in place. And so what he is a provincial administrator for the government, and he's going to be going into the villages and setting up a plan. It's a pilot for 58 villages. And what he's doing is he's going into there, giving an awareness talk about rubbish. Then
so the infrastructure is already basically there. Wow.
All
cool.
We're looking at maybe in 4 months to see the results of our pilot, which we're trying to launch April 15th.
Okay. So can you talk about that? So how are you going to add value to what he's already doing or what he's been doing?
He hasn't been able to do, they've done it in one village. He hasn't been able to do it in this. He's head of this province, which is 6 districts, 58 villages. And we're talking about maybe 5,000 people. The area is 2/3 of the second largest island in Fiji, which is Zakandrove.
Wow.
Yes. I mean, this is big. And what he's doing, he's going to be going in, but they didn't have money to fund this project.
But you're going to be able to provide that.
That's what I'm going to do.
That's amazing. Can you talk about the challenges of that? I mean, because that's got to be incredibly difficult.
We're just doing our memorandum of understanding.
Oh wow, okay.
And then I'm going to put it out to through social media. I'm going to put it out. In fact, I'm not worried about the money for some odd reason. I just have a feeling that we're going to be fine with it. My motto is, we can't get it started. I'll start it my damn self, right? But we want to put it out on social media to people we know. I tried to go through corporate, but we're too small. We're not recognized. Yeah, so we have.
Well, we'll give you a lot of shout outs on our social media. Yeah. If you give us your donation page, we'll shout it out too. 100%. Yeah, anything we can do to help you.
Honestly, I will tell you, I'm blown away because I didn't think that it would be so easy to connect with someone that would manage our whole mission, that they had the blueprint. I never expected it. And it's like, wow, we've struck gold,
Are these talks, what's their format? Does he just go and give seminars?
No. When he goes in the first round, everyone in each village, if you're not working or if you're not in school, everyone will attend assembly. Everyone in the village.
Okay.
And he'll do a complete half-day awareness training of rubbish.
Okay.
And then he'll.
So is it like talking about the environmental impact of different materials? Is that sort of the idea?
We haven't followed. We've gone through the structuring of it, but his idea is to see how it impacts them, each village individually. They have a presentation Yes. And each village has their own conservation plan. And so we're not giving them anything. We're asking them to take ownership and add this to their plan and how it can be added, how they can work this into.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's also about accountability.
Yes. It's
Ah.
ownership. They're the stakeholders of their home, right?
Oh,
This
I
is
love what you're doing. I love this. This is great.
yeah.
Because sorry to interrupt you, but I just feel like a lot of what I see around me, and especially what's been going on, I think, and one of the things that's been a real issue politically and socially for our country is people don't want to be accountable. People don't want to take ownership. People want to blame. People just want to avoid responsibility wherever they can. And this is like totally the opposite, where it's like, no, if our communities are polluted, it's because of me.
Yeah. And if we don't do this, what are the consequences? I mean, and when you think about your family, I want to leave something for my grandchildren so that we don't have to worry. And that's not saying that we're not going to worry, but they have at least a chance of the things that I saw. I saw an amazing, beautiful country. I grew up in the most amazing country, naturally beautiful. And I'd like for them to be able to go, what is it when tourists come and sit on the beach and you've got rubbish all along the beach? It's like, oh,
Yeah, it's sad. Yeah.
sad. And it's everywhere.
Was there a year when you went back that you especially noticed it? Was it gradual?
I especially noticed it when I went 3.5 years ago. I
Okay.
really especially
Because that
noticed
was the spark. You were walking with your friend on the beach, right?
Right. I especially noticed it then. But
Okay.
years prior, you notice the changes through, the logging industry where the reef that I grew
Uh,
up, the reef died because whenever it rained, you'd have mud come down from through the rivers and hit the oceans. And the reefs are a big part of their livelihood. The reefs are major protection for all these, the ocean. I mean, it just you're
the
talking fish.
ecosystem of the ocean,
Yeah,
sure.
the ecosystem. And so the reefs are dying, and people are working hard to try to bring them back or to preserve the amount of reef loss that we have. It's a lot of different things that you just see and you notice, but you see it every day and you really become apathetic to it. It's just not catching. Or if you're gone and you come back and you see it, it's like, oh my God, it's more apparent to you because you see the changes in a different way.
Did your friend notice a change in you that day? I'm just curious.
Fijian people are unique because they're not a lot about talking, so you could be walking and
Uh,
it's not. And for her and I were walking on the beach, I'm like, wow, look at all of this. And she's like, yeah, man. And so sounds really funny, but and then I said, we need to do something about it. And I said, what about a nonprofit? And she goes, I think that would be a great idea.
mm.
And I said, okay, let's do it. And that was the extent of the conversation.
But that's all. But that's all it needed. That's all the kindling it needed. The fire was lit.
Yes, and I sent her something. It was the process again. I would say is sitting there thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it rather than just getting into it.
So what I'm understanding is that based on their better sense of accountability, they're going to make different purchasing decisions as consumers.
That's a very good question because we had a meeting last night going over the last bits of the MOU. And the conversation was, you can make better soaps with all the natural stuff. So why are you going to the store to buy a bar of soap, $2 for a palm olive when you can make your own and then enjoy? You can make your own better,
Right.
And so,
And put the
yeah,
scents that you want and really tailor it to what you want.
do what you want because I love going to the farmer's market and I go crazy over natural stuff, right? So we had that conversation. The other conversation is they're not complaining, but they're highlighting diabetes as being a major, major problem. You go back to Coke and looking at, a can of Coke and you're thinking there's 16 teaspoons of sugar in there.
Yeah, isn't that insane to think about? I mean, I just
Right. And, people are unconscious about it. I loved my caramel macchiatos. I really loved them. But I was like, okay, you know what? You really need to work on, your management of what you're consuming. And so what I did is I did a calorie count for a week. And I realized a lot of my calories were consumed by the macchiato.
a macchiato. Yeah.
And that changed my mindset to make me give it up. I gave them up. And it wasn't about the money. It was about holy mother, I'm having a lot of calories, and then I have to scrunch on a salad for dinner. So that wasn't going to fly with me anymore.
But you had to realize that what the calorie count was in each drink first.
Yes, yes,
That was
and
key.
that's what it took, because otherwise I was like, I'm going to have my macchiato regardless. And that's what we're trying to work on. Is he keeps bringing home mindset. He said that's what he's afraid of, is how hard it would be to that's the big challenge. I'm really hopeful, and I don't know, call me romantic, but I'm hopeful that, if we sat down and said, okay, let's look around and say, is this what you want? Having pride and in your environment, it's something I work on. I'm really struggling because, I like to buy a lot of stuff, and it's like, ooh, now the feeling is getting to be
Sure.
like, did you really need that? Where is it going when you don't want it? So.
It's such a titanic problem that you're addressing. So, but it needs to be addressed, right? Because like you say, it's like you think about your grandchildren, your great grandchildren, your great great grandchildren. What
Yes.
world are they going to be stepping into?
Yes. And you think, these companies didn't evolve overnight. If you look at McDonald's started with one McDonald's, right?
Yeah.
These companies didn't start overnight. And so we need to hurry along because of but little things that can make changes in terms of, okay, take one village that's probably on the coast, and you say, you don't know which way the hurricane's going to go from, you can't predict that, but you can start giving them the right tools to build the right homes
Mhm.
to prepare for these things, one village at a time. Then that's where you start, and then they can affect 10 people. I'm in the power of 10, and then they can affect 10 people.
Right. No, exactly. Because then they'll go home and they'll share what they learned from you with their friends, with their family. Right. Sure.
Right. And failure is not an option, so let's just get that straight.
It's absolutely not. You only get one Earth. What's the number one thing that you just love to walk and see when you're back home? In terms of nature, is it the ocean? Is it the beach? Is it the sand? Is it the feel of the sand on your feet?
Okay, so when you get there and you walk out on the beach, I would encourage you to go to the outer islands, because when you're sitting on this beach, the sands are just yellow. They're beautiful, the color of sand. They're just clean sand.
Oh, wow.
And then the water is, yep. Then and you're sitting there, and the waters are crystal clear. And I
That's
mean,
amazing.
they have the clearest waters in the world. And then you see the most, I mean, the ranges of blue through that ocean.
Mm,
It's unbelievable. It's truly unbelievable. The South Pacific, and it's something to see. I can't describe it. It's Hawaii is different. I love Hawaii, but Hawaii is very different.
for you, it's so it feels like it's almost more visual, or
Yes,
it's a combination. Okay, okay,
it's a
visual. Yeah.
combination. But there's also we were talking about this the other day. You feel the tingling of life in the air.
Ah, oh, I
You
love that.
yes, you automatically decompress, and you can feel the vibration of life in the air. It's just everywhere. The colors are brighter. Here we're kind of our environment, and I guess unless you're in the country or something, if you're in the cities, you don't feel that as strong.
Yeah, I think I know what you
You're
mean.
missing. Yes, yes.
Do you think that a local Fijian would almost take that for granted, being that it's around them all the time? Is that something that you guys deal with, or is it just something that culturally they grow up always appreciating?
If I were to look at I would say my brothers and sisters in Fiji, they depend on the land. The land,
So it's a different
farm,
mindset entirely.
yeah. This
Okay.
it's almost like the mindset of the Native American.
Okay.
They get up in the morning and they look out over the ocean and they see the changes in the weather and what the weather's going to be like. And do I go fishing today? They're very in tune and very in touch with the land. I think maybe the younger generations, might be more westernized and have kind of become less in touch. But with how climate change has come about and with these hurricanes, I think they're very much aware of how much they need to claim back their lands, meaning claim back the ownership of taking care of it, putting moratoriums on the reef where the chief says, okay, it's called tambu. And the chief says, we're not going to 6 months tambu on that reef. No one touches anything on that reef. You don't sneak up and go and fish and get a fish. You don't touch it. That's the law, you know?
My perspective must be so strange to you, because I feel like I was looking at more of like a something that needs to be appreciated. The way you talk about it, it's almost something that we need to coexist with and utilize, and it uses us too.
Yes, I mean it's a cycle, and they're very much in the cycle of taking care of it now. And I don't want to say that these governments, they're not equipped to deal with the mass amount of rubbish that's being generated on this new lifestyle. They're just overwhelmed, and if you really look into some of the islands, they just cannot manage the onslaught of waste.
Wow.
You know, my big picture is that maybe we can visit countries that are doing great, you know, in managing their trash, and saying, okay, how can we translate this out through the Pacific? It's a kind of all hands on board with this kind of, you know, with this project.
I'm always interested in hearing about maybe moments when you, either through challenges or for whatever reason, you were about to quit, but then you didn't. Was there ever a moment in those 3 years when you were working with your life coach where you were just thinking, you know what, I'm just gonna throw the towel and go do something else? Or was it always just, there's no, like, I mean, you already said there's no, failure isn't an option.
Pretty much all those 3 years, I'm like, seriously, you're an idiot. What sane person would want to do this? But I couldn't put it away, you know.
Just kept coming up.
Yes, you know. And my coach was like, you know, because it got to the point where I either do this or I just don't have a life. I'll be a bum, and, you know, which is just not in me. The coach was like, seriously, you know, just get to it. And I'm like, but I'm not worthy. And he says, you know, does a hose ask, are you worthy to carry water? Does, you know, to carry water? And I'm like, oh my God, we're getting into
Oh, wow.
So either you do it or you don't, you know, but my thing is to stop crying about it. And I couldn't stop crying about it. So I just
so you did it, and then I love it, snowball. Now you've got more, and I'm sure each person you talk to certainly wants to learn and hear more about it, and it's so critical.
It is, and I have a lot of learning to do. You know, like I said, I know nothing about conservation. There's a class at UC Berkeley that I want to get into. I'm learning this on the fly, so don't think I'm some great, you know, conservation guru. I am far from it. It's a lot of learning I've got to do, and we're learning along the way.
But your intent and drive, that's what you need.
Yes.
That's the mindset, as we were talking about before.
That word, yes.
Thank you so much for being on. I really, 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 it's an honor to have you on and to talk to you and to be able to be a part of what you're doing and to help you. And yeah, we're gonna do everything we can to. Is that your 10 o'clock? Sorry.
No, I'm just going to mute you because it'll go off soon.
But just one last thing before we go, I just wanted to just give you a chance. If you want to just say something, what's your takeaway?
My takeaway, if I were to leave anybody with anything, it's really, we don't do enough downtime to self-reflect. We're, you know, in the United States, and I'm going to say, the people of this country are the hardest working people. And they have the biggest hearts. They really do. It's, you know, people visualize America as land of money and everybody's
capitalism, right?
Yeah, we all work hard. You know, people work hard to put their food on the table and everything. But we don't take enough time. And that's one of the blessings of COVID. If people is to just take time with your family. You see more people on the beaches, more people getting out. The coast, you know, traffic jam on the coast. Take time to just do some self-reflection and honor what's coming up for you, you know. And,
I love it. Yeah. Self-reflect.
Yeah.
Honor what's inside you. That's so great. That's perfect. And I agree 100% that that's one of the beautiful things. I mean, as horrible as the crisis was and is, it's still ongoing, but it's just a lot of us have a lot more time without commutes, right?
Right.
Even that, I mean, that's a lot of time.
You know, people in this country they drive themselves so hard. And yes, you know, we want to achieve and everything, but also those moments, there's an inner voice that's saying, you know what, honor yourself as well. That's my big thing I'm learning it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This has been beautiful.
Thank you.
We're excited to see where you go. And again, anything that we can do to help you, just send us everything and we'll post it up on our social as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. Thank you.